Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Robot Carnival from 1987. This is an anthology anime film, and it has a lot of directors who got their first shot at directing a short and directing in a major motion picture, and it's kind of an obscure film actually. But when I got into anime in the mid-90s, it wasn't. It was aired on the Sci-Fi Channel a lot. The Sci-Fi Channel didn't have a lot of anime, and it was honestly harder to get your hands on anime. It didn't help that Blockbuster had an anime section, but anytime you went, it would say mature audiences only on every videotape. So the options for me, and in 1995, it was about 11 or 12, were really limited to seeing anime. And it was kind of just the TV safe versions that the Sci-Fi Channel would play. So I ended up watching this a lot more because of that. It was all that was available to me. It was the worst. So Robot Carnival being on the Sci-Fi Channel was this, Vampire Hunter D and Akira made it feel more accessible and made me feel like I was experiencing it. And so Robot Carnival got kind of elevated in my mind in terms of importance. I can't find anything about its release in Japan, whatsoever. Did it do well? I understand it had a lot of money. You can really see that on the screen. I don't know if it actually did well or how it was released. I haven't been able to find that. But I know how it was released in America, and apparently it was actually cut up. The version I grew up with was not the original version in Japan. They messed up the order of the shorts within this film. I'm not sure if there's a way you can organize this film where the flow would be better. Anthology films in general always have flow problems. There are very few that don't. I actually haven't really seen this in a very long time, but I watched it a lot in the 90s, and I don't think I had very good taste in the 90s. Rewatching it was interesting. I'm just gonna go through each of the segments because it's always hard to figure out how to review each segment, and I'm probably gonna butcher everybody's name as well. I'm gonna do this in the order of the Sci-Fi Channel airing. You can actually watch that one on YouTube. There are many different versions of this film. To my understanding, there are many different versions on YouTube. I'm just gonna go with the version I remember. It was an English dub. The opening, which was directed by Atsutoko Fukushima and Katsuhiro Otomo, who was the director of Akira. The opening is actually one of the strongest parts, and they directed both the opening and the closing. It's really kind of funny, violent kind of animation humor, but it really works for it. I think a lot of times when this film takes advantage of its chosen medium, it works really well, and that's one of them, where this Robot Carnival comes to town and just destroys everything. It almost feels like the robots are we don't really understand. Explosions all over the place, and I kind of love that about that opening. It really has a good energy to it. It's a lot of fun. It starts off the movie right. Actually, at the time before Robot Carnival, they'd always advertise it saying the director of Akira directed the opening and the closing, so that was kind of an enticement to watch it. It does very much look like that style. This came out about actually the year before, and a lot of these people ended up actually working on Akira. The animation director worked on this film. People who were key animators worked on this film, so it was kind of being made at the same time, so you can kind of see that level of detail. Not that this film is anywhere near what Akira was at all. So the next film was Starlight Angel, which I think is fourth in the original version, but in the sci-fi version is first. And that one, I kind of like the fantasy of that one. It's about a girl who goes to a very Disneyland or Disney World-esque theme park with her girlfriend. They have a good time, and then she realizes when her girlfriend meets up this guy, it's that this guy she either went out with or was her boyfriend or whatever. She runs, but then this robot picks up this medallion she had, and they fly around. It's kind of weird and strange, but the fantasy element of it works. It's the kind of story that would actually only really work in a short film. It does take a lot of crazy liberties with itself, which I kind of like to an extent. I like the soundtrack to it. The soundtrack in this film is really great. Joe Hisaishi was one of 3 composers who worked on this film. He often is credited with the entire score, but to my understanding, other people helped. Joe Hisaishi is very versatile, and this is around the time of Nausicaa, and that score is incredibly versatile. And so I honestly would believe if someone told me he did the entire score, but the score is really tremendous, and you can check out the score on YouTube also. This sequence, I like the 80s-ness of it. I like the fantasy, the very 80s, looking at someone's trapper keeper image kind of fantasy. And it kind of gets into the fantasy, the love element of this. There's a lot of love with robots in Robot Carnival. It's kind of a theme they have going on throughout it. And Starlight Angel is the only directorial effort by its director who really really only did character designs. I'm not going to really try to pronounce his name because I'll screw it up again. And I actually think he showed a lot of promise in this. It doesn't make a lot of sense necessarily, but it was a fun little silly fantasy. Then we have Cloud, and Cloud is interesting and artsy and has this robot. The whole thing is seriously just a shot of him walking, and you see in the clouds humanity's rise and fall, and it's kind of interesting and artsy, but it's also boring as all hell. I used to think how different and interesting and the different animation styles throughout it, and how this film can be, you know, kind of artsy and weird, and now when I watch it this time, I just hated it. It was the worst. It really ruined the flow of the movie. If there was one short of this that I could do away with, it would be Cloud. I don't really want to see it again. I think it was kind of a failure. It's not really artsy. It's kind of like an artsy animation school short, and if I had seen it under that context, I think I would have liked it more, but seeing it with all these great animators, and then you see Cloud and you're like, what the fuck, are you serious? It doesn't really work with the rest of the short. It's really glaring. It sticks out like a sore thumb, and it's pretentious as all hell. Even the fantasies of this film kind of drag me in, and I love it, and Cloud just... blah. It's just artistry jizzing all over my face, and I would like to wipe that away and think of the next short instead of thinking of this nonsense. The next one is Franken's Gears, which is by Koji Morimoto. I don't really like it. It's more about the details of the set, which I think actually works for it. It's very beautiful to look at. It's about a guy who's basically creating a robot monster with lightning. It is really more about the details of the animation. Of course, I had to watch a shitty recorded quality copy from the Sci-Fi Channel from the 90s because I'm a nostalgic idiot. So I think this would probably be something you should watch on DVD or a higher quality copy. If you look at the animation of it, it's great and wondrous and amazing. If you look at the story of it, it's like, okay, that was just like a short little snippet. It's interesting that he would choose to do something like that for a little short within Robot Carnival instead of doing more of a story. I mean, I kind of find it interesting. I don't love it. It's at least well animated enough. The next one I really like, which was Deprive, which is by someone whose name I'm not going to attempt to do, but it'll be below. And it's kind of like an alien invasion happens, and there's this woman, and she's in love with this robot. You see them hugging, and she gives them a locket. They have this locket imagery they're really into in this movie. She gets kidnapped, and then the robot decides to go and transform into like a human or an illusion of a human around it and fight and get her back. And that is really cool. It's a little stupid. It has very much like 80s synth arcade kind of music. I thought really works for it and was frankly quite a lot of fun. And it's a fun short. It really gets you into it. It's a simple story, but it really moves and you're like really into it and you understand it and it works very visually. None of these stories that I've done thus far have had dialogue in them. That's something I love about animation, how well it can do visual storytelling. And this is one where you don't really need the visual storytelling, but it tells it so clearly. Both this one and Starlight Angel. And even if they get into weird, bizarre moments, anyone watching it can understand what's going on. But I think Deprive is the most fun short of the whole thing. And it's animated impeccably well, and it's just a really amazing thing to watch. That's one of my favorite ones of the whole thing. It's a little stupid and silly, but it's stupid and silly in the right kind of anime way that makes you cheer and makes you love watching explosions. So the next one, Presence, which was directed by someone whose name I'm not going to be able to pronounce. It'll have a beep below. And he directed the Kite series, which I'm not really familiar with. This one I used to think really arty and deep when I was like in early middle school. Now I just find it melodramatic and strange and morally a little repulsive. A guy who's married and his wife is, I guess, kind of a feminist and she's working at her job. That seems to be a point for people, which irritates me. And so because she's like this big feminist and is hard to work with and is doing really well in her corporate job, he decides to make like a robot girlfriend, which is upsetting for a couple of reasons. But one is like this guy's like this sensitive guy and kind of more feminine himself, and yet he feels like he needs a robot girlfriend that enhances gender roles for another gender, and yet he himself doesn't exemplify the gender roles of his own gender, which is incredibly hypocritical. And then he like beats up the robot girl. I mean, he just seems like the worst fucking character in the world. It tries to play it off like it's arty and thoughtful, but it's really just a bunch of shitty morals kind of disguising themselves as such. And I kind of hate the idea that like, oh, feminism's evil, but men can do whatever they want, that's fine. Like, Like, fuck that. This is a horrible piece of shit short. I kind of like the animation. I like the design of it, actually. I like the flow of it. It's kind of a slower, smooth flow. So I kind of like how it's all put together, but the morals of it I find fucking repulsive as all shit. I don't think what it's trying to say about feminism is correct. It's really kind of morally probably the worst short. If I didn't hate clouds so much, this would definitely be up there. Reading reviews and hearing reviews and everybody bringing up that like his wife's this major feminist, and it's something they discuss in it, and it just kind of feels like it's like, and so that's why I made my robot girlfriend. I go, no, that sounds like why you're a piece of shit. It's shitty backwards nature to gender roles just ruins it. Just because your wife works and is this tough woman at a corporate level doesn't mean like she can't be a sufficient wife. It just means like you just sound like an asshole. That is your fault. You should take care of it, not make a robot girlfriend. Then we have A Tale of Two Robots, Chapter 3, Foreign Invasion. There was not a Chapter 1 or 2. This is in no version of the film, Chapter 3 of it, but whatever. It's directed by someone whose name I can't pronounce. It'll be below. It's actually very fun, but apparently the dubs kind of mess it up in a very offensive way. It does sound like a lot of American actors kind of doing bad ethnic stereotypes, but I'd say the two kind of steampunk giant monsters fighting each other in 19th century Japan is actually a lot of fun, to be honest. It's one of the more fun shorts. When this film is fun, it's really good. When it's serious and trying to say a message, it often sucks horribly. And this one, I think, engages in what this film does best, and even though the English dub of this sequence is pretty horrible, it's still a fairly fun film, but it's definitely flawed because of that. Then you have Nightmare, which is kind of a take on Night on Bald Mountain from Fantasia, kind of a robot version of that. I thought it actually really worked very well. It's also a take on The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. It has a lot of Disney references in it. It's actually very well done. It's directed by this guy who's, again, I'm not gonna butcher people's names, so it's right there. The animation is incredibly well done. It's a visual treat to look at. It's a really great ending to it. It kind of makes you not think of all the flaws of the rest of the film. And then you get to the ending, which is similar to the opening, directed by the same director of Akira. It's equally as funny. It feels a little more Monty Python-ish than the opening. Kind of reminds me of Meaning of Life with the building pirates thing. It kind of makes me think of the film more fondly. And really watching it, I was really not as into it. I don't think it's a really great animated anthology film. I think it's really flawed. I don't really like a lot of the stories, but the ones that do work really well. I think there's probably 4 I actually like, and you can watch those. People have put up just the shorts individually on YouTube. You can watch them by themselves and think they'd be fine, but you can watch it together as well. But it was just a major film for me. It was a major animated film for me at the time. It has an amazing animation budget, which it really uses at its disposal. Some of the animation in this film is just amazing and beautiful. Probably some of the best the Japanese animation industry could do at that time. But the thing is about any animation, no matter where the country is, it's about the storytelling. It's not just about the animation. And this film's not the greatest in terms of storytelling. It's purely like, how cool is this animation kind of a movie. And that's really how you should be seeing it. I probably would not have ever seen this if this was not on the Sci-Fi Channel. Why would you? You know, you have to be really into one of these directors or something, and that's why you would. It's just because it was a major deal for me at the time, because I had read in like Wizard, the Guide to Comics, and read in various magazines about anime, and it was like all you could really rent was Akira, and then it would say mature audiences. My parents were like, no. And knowing this was on TV, I knew I could watch it because I knew things were like edited for TV. So it was kind of a big moment for me, and it was something I loved just because I anticipated watching this stuff so much, and I wanted to watch this stuff so much, and I had such limited access. But when you have more access to things, you kind of reevaluate them and you go, were they that good? And Robot Carnival does not live up to that whatsoever. I wouldn't recommend Robot Carnival. It's just, if you're really into that kind of style and into that animation, maybe watch some of the ones that I actually like Dupree, Nightmare. Those are probably the 2 that are probably the best. And check out the soundtrack because it's pretty cool. Personally, I am not the most nostalgic person, and sometimes I can be shocked and go, you know, that was actually better than I thought it was. But Robot Carnival is not that at all. It kind of makes me go, oh, you know what? I didn't really have good taste back then. So if you have seen Robot Carnival and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.